Long before evil ever showed up, way back before the first humans walked the earth, there was nothing but infinite goodness in the heavens. Everything was just perfect. Every angel shone with a brilliant light and held a deep respect for their Father, the creator of everything. But there was one angel who really stood out from the rest. Lucifer. You were the epitome of perfection, overflowing with wisdom and beauty. You stood out as the most intelligent, the most powerful, and the highest in honor and dignity among the heavens. Everyone looked up to you. Lucifer was God's most beautiful creation, his masterpiece. He was the first being. God shaped the very first creation with his powerful hand, and he took great joy in crafting his masterpiece. He gave Lucifer a unique power, unlike any other angel. Lucifer was incredibly intelligent, second only to God. But, as it turns out, not everything about him was perfect. He was blameless in his ways until wickedness was discovered within him. That's when Lucifer transformed into the source of all evil and suffering in the world. He became the prince of darkness, the corrupter of souls, the lord of destruction. He became Satan. Lucifer's fall really left a mark in heaven. Even though the light came back, it just wasn't the same, kind of like a broken mirror. Paradise would always hold onto the memory of the betrayal. Even the brightest star can turn to darkness, as Lucifer's narrative warns. But how did we get here? Why did what was once an ocean of calm turn into the germ of evil? The skies before the heavens, before the unfortunate event Lucifer was created to be perfect. You were chosen as a guardian cherub, walking on the holy mount of God and among the fiery stones. Heaven is this amazing place of perfect order, right? It's got this divine structure where every angel has a mission and a purpose to fulfill at the highest level. The seraphim are like these living flames, burning with love and purity, singing their hearts out, "Holy, holy is the Lord Almighty." Then you've got the cherubim, who are the guardians of divine wisdom and protectors of the universe's secrets. They act as a shield, keeping any shadow of impurity at bay. And closer to earth, we find the archangels and angels. Archangels like Michael and Gabriel are the messengers for those big, decisive moments. The angels closest to humans are the guards of souls who accompany us on our journey and make sure that evil doesn't approach in this perfect order, followed by warriors who bear the divine message on their swords. Lucifer the morning star was the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and flawless in beauty. Since God desired to create something unique out of his boundless love and understanding. In addition to being gorgeous, Lucifer was the leader and beacon that the other angels followed. His charisma was captivating, and his presence evoked devotion and reverence. He moved among the angels with unmatched grace, walking among seraphim and cherubim, paid close attention to what he had to say, and even Michael, the legendary warrior, was impressed by his knowledge. The heavenly choirs were arranged by Lucifer, who led them in their songs and prayers while praising the Creator with zeal and emotion. His voice was like a flame in the darkness, a radiance. The Bible describes how Lucifer's fall started. Your heart became proud on account of your beauty, and you corrupted your wisdom because of your splendor. What was once his gift became his downfall. God had not created evil, but something perfect. But Lucifer, blinded by his own brilliance, allowed pride to grow in his heart. His desire for glory consumed him like a hidden fire and gradually destroyed him. The wisdom that motivated others became his weapon of self-destruction, and the beauty that was appreciated became the cause of his downfall. His vanity drove him to strive for success. He declared, "I will ascend to the heavens and raise my throne above the stars of God," beyond his location to do so in his heart, and suddenly the heavens trembled. Peace broke like brittle glass when rebellion broke out. In a terrifying account, Jesus claimed to have witnessed Satan instantly descend from heaven like lightning. After being exiled from the light that had been his home, Lucifer was thrown into the abyss. His splendor was buried in darkness and his glory dimmed. How did the dazzling celestial body get quenched when the morning star was cut down? Lucifer is rarely referenced in sacred literature, despite the fact that his impact is great throughout the Holy Scriptures. Before talking about Lucifer's big celestial rebellion, why does a creature with such earthly influence appear so little? This needs to be understood in the Bible. The Bible discusses Lucifer's story in sporadic, symbolic sections, but his nature is still unknown and has only been mentioned in bits. For this reason, this movie draws inspiration from both the Bible and other sources, mainly Father Jose Antonio Fortia's book History of the Angelic World and St. Augustine's writings, in which Lucifer stands for the aspiration to transcend his creator. Augustine observes that Lucifer, blinded by his own light, strove to be equal to God and was banished, leaving behind an enduring lesson. Let's now examine how Lucifer's soul started to corrupt Lucifer's journey into darkness, which at first was only a faint spark of passing thought. Lucifer pondered, what if my light could shine brighter? What if my glory didn't always need to serve another? These were minor, nearly imperceptible questions, but like seeds, they took root and grew in the silence of his thoughts. He started to picture himself exalted on the throne, and with every duty he carried out, that voice inside him grew stronger. Meanwhile, heaven remained in perfect harmony, but something in Lucifer grew farther away every day, and the angels started to notice his transformation. He became mysterious and introspective. One day, Gabriel came up to him and said, "Lucifer, brother, what burden is on your heart? Your light becomes restless." Lucifer gave him a glance and said, "There are things that even we cannot comprehend." Dear Gabriel. Gabriel sensed a cold and disquiet, but Lucifer averted his sight to avoid revealing the storm within him. Over time, Lucifer began to disregard his duties as the commander of the heavenly choir. The angel sensed his departure like a missing star in the firmament. He now attends praise gatherings with mixed feelings of pride and bitterness, having formerly stood first. Heaven had clear laws and no chains. As Lucifer struggled between his light and shadow, the angels around him sensed something strange and silently followed him, as if his light could lead them to another destiny. God had given each angel the freedom to love and serve in their perfection, and they also possessed the gift of free will. One of the cherubim noticed his change and approached him once. Lucifer responded with a frigid smile. The morning star's decision ignited a spark within him, leading to the discovery of new pursuits beyond our current knowledge. "I intend to rise above the clouds and become the highest." That night, his radiance transformed from one of praise to one of ambition. Paradise, once beautiful and peaceful, felt the first tremor of revolt. His name, Lightbringer, was not an empty title, since he was heaven's. Lucifer, the morning star that rose first, illuminated others in creation's night, spoke of God like no one else. Despite the fact that angels were not innocent souls, but rather a reflection of God's purity, Lucifer drew them in with his charisma and unshakable authority. He did not seek to deceive the angels, but rather spoke with passion and a clear vision. The divine warning to Lucifer. God called him alone in sacred stillness, his voice like a deep river, and addressed him with love and patience. "Lucifer, my son, is the seal of perfection. Your heart's thoughts are diverging from me, causing a disconnect with the divine." Lucifer, with a serene light, answered to the Creator, "Didn't you create me to understand and explore? There's nothing I desire more than to comprehend the depth of your work. Do you think that's wrong?" God's anguish was tremendous, but his heart was huge and gentle. He realized the fragility of the freedom he had granted, and how pride may blossom even in the cleanest soil. "Lucifer," God softly added, "your desire to understand is noble, but your thoughts are becoming self-centered. You have been seduced by the light I place within you, forgetting that this light is a reflection of my love, not your own source." Lucifer lowered his gaze, but a fire of incomprehension and pride began to blaze within him. "My Lord, I have wanted nothing that isn't yours. My light is the gift you gave me. How could I turn away from you if I was made by your will?" God's loving gaze revealed that Lucifer was beginning to see his own glory as an end in itself. Despite not having sinned, his love was fading. God, full of mercy, extended his hand to Lucifer, reminding him to remember where all light comes from and to turn to him for truth. However, Lucifer felt a sting to his pride and a discomfort he couldn't explain. God didn't trust Lucifer's ability to remain faithful, so he withdrew with a bow. God called him. Lucifer's hardened heart sought self-satisfaction and personal glory, leading him to justify his actions. God, in his infinite patience, let him go, knowing he had given him all the love and mercy he could. God gives Lucifer a second chance. God's sorrow was tremendous and excruciating, as he knew he would lose his most precious creation. Despite his boundless mercy, Lucifer's choice had to be respected, even in his fall. I shall love. The Creator pondered about him. As Lucifer drifted away, heaven held its breath for a great revelation that would test every celestial being, especially Lucifer. God delayed the moment to give Lucifer time to grow in humility and strengthen his loyalty. He spoke to him with love and concern, saying that a great revelation was approaching and that the wind would be strong, causing tensions. Lucifer knelt before God, gazing at him with devotion. His voice was soft yet firm, expressing his desire to obey God's commands, even if he couldn't guarantee perfect faithfulness. His heart still burns with your love, and these words were not lies. Lucifer had a genuine desire to remain loyal, but a seed of pride grew in the back of his mind. He felt special and unique among all angels, and wondered if he wasn't the one who shined the brightest. God patiently gave him another chance. He postponed the revelation to give Lucifer more time to seek humility in his heart. The test will be difficult, but he reminds him of his origin and essence, and that all light comes from him. Lucifer's temptation was similar to Adam and Eve's experience in the Garden of Eden, where God had created a peaceful and loving environment. However, the tree of knowledge of good and evil reminded them of their freedom to choose, and the serpent's whisper to Eve led to the desire to be like God. For the first time, the great revelation test in his great compassion, God postponed the trial time and continually spoke to Lucifer, "My son, as the time of revelation approaches, prepare yourself with a fatherly warning and a loving message of humility." God loved Lucifer and believed that love could overcome the pride that was darkening his light. However, when the time came to end the waiting, God had to consider all celestial beings, not just Lucifer. Heaven felt a sense of tension and deep expectation, and on that day, God died. The Creator revealed to the angels a vision of a place where life would flourish and reflect his love and glory in a new way. The vision included planets spinning in perfect order and earth, where life would flourish in its full splendor. The angels were fascinated by this vision. The Creator's intentions brought joy and a sense of newness. However, God's statements became even more obscure. "I will create a universe and humanity in my image and likeness, a blend of heaven and earth. I will also become flesh," the second person of the Trinity. The Eternal asked the angels to worship him in the human form of Jesus Christ, causing a sense of awe and jubilation among them. Lucifer stared with a distant expression, as if the light surrounding him couldn't pierce his heart. His gaze was like a dark well, and his countenance revealed the deep turmoil he was experiencing. When Lucifer defied God, everything crumbled. Lucifer challenges God. Within Lucifer, the idea of bowing to a human form, worshipping God in the humility of mortal flesh, seemed incomprehensible and unacceptable. Why? He thought. Why would perfection itself need to lower itself? Why are we, beings of light, asked to worship a being of flesh? He heard that God would create humans and that they would end up corrupting themselves. Even knowing this, God would still sacrifice himself for them. The vision of the crucifixion was unbearable for Lucifer. This revelation made him explode internally. These finite and ungrateful beings would rebel. Not only would they rebel, but they would also kill him. Lucifer was stunned. Could it be any more absurd? He thought. He observed God's plan with a mixture of disbelief and disdain. The mystery of the incarnation, The revelation that the Creator would take human form in Jesus Christ had unleashed an internal storm within him. From that storm, a burning question emerged. Why not me? For centuries, he had been the most beautiful, the closest to the throne, the Creator's masterpiece. Why hadn't he been chosen for the hypostatic union? He felt that his light, his splendor, and his wisdom made him worthy of something greater. But instead of elevating him, God had decided to lower himself to human flesh. From this thought, bitterness was born. A bitterness that coiled around his heart like a serpent, suffocating every trace of love and respect he had once held for the Father. Finally, the decisive moment arrived. God stood before them, surrounded by the multitude of angels. One by one, his brothers knelt in adoration, accepting the revelation of the incarnation. But Lucifer remained standing. His body was rigid, his gaze fixed on God's throne, and his heart filled with silent hatred. Slowly, he opened his lips and, in a tone devoid of emotion, uttered a simple word, one that resonated like thunder in heaven's silence. No, God looked at him with a mixture of sadness and love, but Lucifer felt nothing but disdain. He took a deep breath and repeated, this time with a force that shook all present, "No!" His voice rose, cold and defiant, like that of a king pronouncing judgment. The angels present shuddered, unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. How could the purest, most beautiful angel defy the Creator himself? How dare he disobey? Lucifer then turned his gaze to the multitude of angels, and with terrifying calm, he began to address them. Don't you realize this is a mistake? Can't you see that what God asks of us is absurd? His voice, charged with dark wisdom, filled the celestial space. He asks us to worship an inferior form, to bend our knees before mortal flesh. This isn't glory, it's humiliation. Each word, laden with intelligence and persuasion, embedded itself in the angels' hearts, sowing doubt and disturbing the peace that once filled them. God asked the unacceptable of us. He continued with icy passion. We are not the ones who must accept this nonsense. It is God who has failed, who has taken the wrong path. Why should we bow to something beneath us? We, who were made of pure light, should occupy a higher place, not lower ourselves. The angels listened bewildered. His words seemed so logical, so full of reason. In some, the seed of rebellion began to germinate. Lucifer, with the charisma that had always been his gift, looked at them one by one, his face reflecting cold determination. Lucifer, first among angels, had fallen. The angels listened to Lucifer's words. The angels, filled with doubt, listened to Lucifer's words, whispers of rebellion and reason that echoed in their hearts. His speech carried a seductive logic, a convincing force that penetrated like a gentle poison. Was God asking the impossible of us? Is it fair that we must bow before a human form, before something so low? These were thoughts some barely dared to formulate, and yet they lingered, growing like shadows in their souls of light. As Lucifer spoke, his words flowed with the charisma and authority he had always possessed. It was impossible not to listen. His speech was firm, direct, and every phrase resonated with a blend of wisdom and defiance. But suddenly, in the midst of his discourse, a voice rose with a force that shook the entire heavens, a cry overflowing with conviction and simplicity. Who is like God? The voice belonged to Michael, the small archangel, a being of lesser rank, but whose purity shone with incomparable strength. His exclamation pierced through the angels like a sword. In 3 words, Michael had answered all of Lucifer's arguments, pointing out the fundamental flaw in his logic. Who is like God? It was a cry of humility, an absolute recognition that no one could rival the Creator, not even the morning star. The angels trembled. Michael's words, so simple and direct, awakened something within them, reminding them of who they were, where they came from, and to whom they owed their existence. Lucifer, upon hearing that cry, turned to Michael, his gaze filled with icy fury but also surprise. Until then, No one had dared to challenge him so openly. Michael stepped toward him, small in comparison, but full of courage. "You are arrogant," he said, his words as thunderous as lightning. His voice, though calm, carried a conviction that pierced like an arrow. "Your light, Lucifer, has become a shadow trying to eclipse the Creator. Can't you see you've placed yourself above God?" Lucifer felt a deep pain in his core, a wound that Michael's words had opened. His pride and ambition had been exposed, laid bare for all to see. In that moment, rage and shame flooded him like dark waves crashing against his heart. With a look of contempt, he tried to stand firm before Michael, but something in those words burned him from within. "You understand nothing," Lucifer retorted, trying to maintain his dignity. "Are you so blind that you can't see what we're being asked as humiliation? I, who was first in his glory, cannot kneel before something so inferior." His words sounded firm, but the contained fury and bitterness distorted his voice. Michael looked at him, serene yet unyielding. His voice, though quiet, held the force of 1,000 storms. "You don't understand love, Lucifer. This isn't about humiliation but love. God becomes flesh for us, and you reject him because you can't bear to be lesser. You've forgotten your place. You've forgotten that all you are is a reflection of his glory. It's not God who lowers himself. It's your pride that elevates you beyond your own being." Lucifer felt he couldn't bear it. It was as if Michael was showing him his own image, and what he saw wasn't beautiful, but a shadow full of resentment. He couldn't withstand the weight of that truth, that love Michael defended so fiercely. Without a word, he turned away, distancing himself from Michael and all who watched. He retreated, his back straight, but inside, an uncontainable anger burned. Alone, Lucifer wept, not tears of sorrow but of pure rage. A growing hatred, born from his wounded pride, consumed him. How dare Michael? How could he challenge me, the brightest of all? Yet deep within, a faint voice reminded him that Michael was right. This truth tormented him the most. The final battle. The battle erupted with a fury that shook the very foundations of heaven. On one side stood the rebel army, led by Lucifer, his splendor cloaked in shadows, his light twisted into darkness. Facing him were the faithful angels, led by Michael, the small archangel who had risen with iron strength, unshakable faith, overflowing humility and courage. Heaven, once a place of peace and harmony, became a dazzling battlefield. A war of light against shadow, loyalty against rebellion. The armies clashed like waves of fire and thunder. Each blow, each crossing of light swords, created flashes that lit up the heavens like shooting stars in a fierce dance. The fallen angels, once the most beautiful and powerful to grace the sky, fought with seemingly inexhaustible fury. But the faithful angels battled with quiet determination, guided by love and loyalty to the Creator. Michael, the lowest-ranking archangel, advanced at the forefront of his brothers, shouting with a fervor that echoed throughout the universe. Who is like God? Michael's strength lay not in his rank or splendor, but in his faith. He fought not for his own glory or pride, but because he knew that goodness, light, and truth were with him. In that certainty, his strength seemed to multiply. The faithful angels felt enveloped in divine power, a protection reminding them they were not alone. The Creator was with them, and that presence gave them strength surpassing any earthly force. Lucifer, enraged, tried to push Michael back. He rose on his wings, exhaling a shadow that enveloped those who looked upon him. "I was the first. I am the true light," he shouted. But his words were empty, hollow, a dark echo of what he once had been. The light within him was a distorted shadow, and his power, though formidable, could not eclipse the truth that Michael held like a pure flame. The battle was fierce, and the heavens themselves felt wounded. Angels who weren't fighting watched in awe and sorrow, feeling the weight of rebellion in their hearts. The peace that had been heaven's core was shattered, and the once perfect order teetered on the brink. Yet, amid the destruction, hope stood firm. The faith of the loyal angels, their love for God, shown in every blow they struck and every step they took toward Lucifer and his followers. At last, the force of good prevailed. Michael's sword raised high. He uttered the battle's final words. By God's power fall. Lucifer. In that moment, darkness split asunder. The rebellion, once so fierce and violent, began to crumble. The fallen angels, a third of all heavenly hosts, were cast out, dragged like stars plummeting from the sky. Lucifer became Satan, and with him, all who had followed his ambition were hurled into the abyss. Heaven fell into a solemn silence, a hush that bore the sadness of an irreparable loss. The war had left deep scars, a wound in paradise that only love and time could heal. The faithful angels felt the battle's weight on their souls, but knew that light had triumphed. Truth, faith, and hope, those virtues which can never be defeated, had prevailed in this victory. Heaven remembered an eternal truth. Good always triumphs over evil, not by force, not by violence, but because goodness is the very essence of God, a light that no darkness can extinguish. Pride, hatred, and ambition may fight fiercely, but they are fleeting shadows against the purity of love and faithfulness. The battle had ended in heaven, the wounded remained at peace. Michael's faith, the humility of his words, "Who is like God now?" echoed in every corner of the universe, an immovable and eternal truth, a reminder that God's glory is infinite and that nothing, not even the brightest light, can surpass his love. The expulsion and destiny of Lucifer. After the final battle, heaven opened to cast out the rebels. Lucifer, once the morning star, along with his fallen followers, was hurled far from the light, dragged into an abyss of darkness and desolation. In the act of expulsion, heaven itself seemed to tremble. The angels, who had been the most beautiful and powerful, those whose light rivaled the stars, fell like banished meteors, cast into the lower world, a place of chaos and shadow, a kind of eternal exile where God's glory could not be seen or felt. Lucifer, now transformed into Satan, felt the weight of the fall like a burning iron in his being. The total separation from God, from light and heavenly peace, was a wound deeper than any physical punishment could inflict. The underworld, where he was confined with his followers, wasn't yet the final hell, but a state of chaos and utter spiritual isolation, a place beyond peace and glory's reach. It was like a shattered dream, a dark reflection of heavenly order, a realm utterly cut off from holiness. For Satan, this expulsion meant the end of his original purpose. Yet, in his pride and rage, his hatred morphed into a new mission. If he couldn't attain God's glory, he would destroy it wherever he found it. In this abyss of despair, his gaze turned toward creation, to the material world God had promised to make. In his twisted mind, a thought took shape. If he couldn't have heaven, he'd corrupt God's most precious work, humanity. The idea of seeing humans, made in God's image, dragged into darkness gave him bitter satisfaction. Humans were the ones who had stolen his place at God's throne. That love, that goodness with which they were created, would become the target of his hatred. His motivation was clear. If he and his fallen angels couldn't be in God's presence, then humans shouldn't deserve it either. This hatred and resentment transformed into a mission, a deep desire to sabotage the divine work and corrupt the purity of creation. Lucifer's expulsion and his army of fallen angels had a direct consequence on the balance of good and evil in the world. From that moment, evil began to exist not just as an absence of goodness, but as an active and organized force. The demons, led by Satan, began to seek ways to exert their influence over the material world, to corrupt humans, to incite pride, envy, and despair, the very feelings that had led to their own downfall. God, in his love and justice, had allowed this separation. The expulsion was not just a punishment, but an act of divine justice. The angels who had chosen rebellion, who had rejected God's love and holiness, could no longer dwell in his presence. God's love was always there, but his justice demanded balance. Those who had decided to reject the light could not continue to bask in it. In this act, the equilibrium between God's love and justice was perfectly manifested. Justice required separation, and love still granted the fallen ones the freedom to exist, albeit in a darkness of their own choosing.